Welcome again, friends. Hello, Lou.
How we doing?
Good. So we are now on the third part of this three-episode series on reincarnation. If you haven't heard episode 1 and 2, which is what number is it, Lou?
This is 157, so 155, 156, and
Yeah.
157.
Yes. So please go back if you don't mind and listen to part 1 and part 2 because it'll make a lot more sense to you. Today we're going to be talking about the third and
Yes,
final.
and you'll be totally entertained too. So
I'm glad.
yeah,
So today we'll be talking about the third and final part of this reincarnation series. And I'm going to try and bring this all to a nice package where we wind it together and say, what exactly causes this? Causes what? Causes what? Causes us to take a new birth, number one. What makes us choose such and such parents? What makes us choose the city where we are born? What makes us choose what body we have, what skills we have, what memories we have, and how we remember previous lifetimes, and various other questions like that. So I would recommend that you try and get this book. It's called Demystifying Reincarnation, and it's written by a man by the name of Chaitanya Charan. It is published in India, and it is a very, very thorough explanation of reincarnation. So let's go. The Gita and the Vedanta, the Gita and the Upanishads, give the greatest and best explanations of many questions that we have about reincarnation. But it's not written in a way that we can understand it. But when we understand it or start to, and we have somebody like Chaitanya Charan telling us the meanings of these Gita shlokas, verses, then it comes clearer to our mind. So one thing we've discussed many, many times is that depending on your karmas in your present lifetime, it gives you the ability to get born in a body and family of your choice in your next birth, right? So you have good karmas, you have the ability to choose what kind of a body you get, or what kind of a family you are in, a wealthy family, a spiritual family. Somebody asked me a question: why is it that because people who are spiritually sattvic get to choose wealth? What does wealth have to do with anything? The reason sattvic people often choose families that are wealthy is because then they don't have to struggle for
right.
much of their life to earn money. They can go directly into doing more spiritual studies because their assets are already there for their own self-protection, as opposed to going out and making sure that you dig ditches because you need to, feed your family and you
Sure.
don't have money. So wealth comes, along with wealth comes the ability to be able to use time for spiritual growth. So then the question of near-death experiences comes up. Near-death experiences, I'll just give you a few because I've used up all my time in the last two episodes. But three examples I'll give you. One is, there was a patient, and you'll find these examples in the book Demystifying Reincarnation, and they're in the Google and Wikipedia and YouTube. This patient, all of them died, and immediately after death, they found that their Atman was out of the body and running to get out of the hospital, and as quickly as possible. And in the process, saw things, and then were realized that the bodies were now brought back to life by the doctors, and their Atman had to come back inside the body. But they saw certain things. So the question then becomes, let me give you three examples. One was this man who was lying on the operating table, and he was supposed to actually be discharged that day. He had a wife and 6 children. His wife and every time the wife came to visit, she would bring 2 kids because only 3 were allowed at any given time. 2, not all 6. He didn't know which children were coming there to visit him that day. Unbeknownst to him, he suffered a cardiac arrest. He didn't know they were supposed to go home, and he was declared dead, and they were resuscitating him. When he was declared dead, his body, he says, left his Atman left his body and tore down at the fastest speed through the hallway towards the exit. As it neared the exit, He says, I saw. Here's the question now. This is the Atman. Seeing is by the eyes. The eyes are on the body, which is dead, and on the table being resuscitated. He
Right.
says, I saw my wife, my oldest son, and my oldest daughter laughing, happy. They didn't know that I was dying or dead. They were happy coming to see me because they came to pick me up. And I saw them, and at that time I was yanked back into my body because they resuscitated. One. Second, a patient died in a hospital on, I think it was the third floor. She said after she died, her Atman rushed out of the hospital through a window, and they only had very tiny small windows to prevent people from committing suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Left from that small window, she said, I went upwards, and on like the sixth floor, she saw on a ledge that nobody could see from the ground a sneaker. And she described the sneaker. She was fascinated. What is a sneaker doing here on this ledge? And just then she was resuscitated. The Atman came back down and again into her body. The doctor who she told this to, Kimberly, I don't remember the last name, said, that's fascinating, but how did you see a sneaker up there? I don't believe this. The doctor went outside. She was very curious, wanted diligently to follow up on this. Went outside. All she could see was the lower halves of the ledges. She couldn't see what's on the above the ledges.
Right.
She went on each floor trying to look up, couldn't see anything. She went up to the sixth floor, and the windows were tiny and not too clean on the outside, so she could barely see. And she looked out and she said, oh, you know what? I do see something over there. It looks like a shoe, but I can't see too clearly. She asked the hospital maintenance people to go however they could and get whatever was on that ledge. Turned out it was the sneaker. It matched the exact description that this patient had given her. Question is, if this doctor had to spend so much time and effort to get that, how did this woman, who wasn't even on the sixth floor, get up to see that? Third example, or maybe that's enough for examples right now. But
no, I want to hear the third example.
What is the third example I wanted to tell you about? So there are people who are blind, and there's a book written on the blind people who die and see things that they don't know, they've never seen. They've been blind from childhood on. There's a book written about these one girl or two girls, I'm not sure, twins, that were given too much oxygen upon birth. And because of that, they became blind. So from childhood onwards, they had never seen anything. They died 3 times in their lifetime. And all 3 times they were resuscitated and brought back. During each one of the 3 times, they said, for the first time in our lives and after our lives, death, we actually saw. And the doctor said, but you're blind. He says, no, doc, we saw. We were able to see when we were blind. So there's books written about this, and there's books written about near-death experiences among blind people and what they see. So the question is, how does this come about? Now, we know about karma causing reincarnation. What birth you choose. Why do you choose to be born again? Because you have desires, unfulfilled desires. You have unfulfilled desires. That's the cause. And because of that, the effect is you are brought back to life. Mm-hmm. The Gita and the Upanishads both say that our body has consciousness. Now, Gita, Upanishads, and the third area of strength for all of these hypotheses and theories, because we can't know that for a fact, we can only hypothesize. Quantum physics now is coming up with stronger and stronger basis for all of these beliefs. I don't know anything about quantum physics. When I read it, I try to understand it, but it's difficult. Anybody, any listener who's an expert in quantum physics, please contact me. I would love to talk to you and find out more about how this works. But anyway, how should I go about this? When we die, right? Let's see perceptions. When we see things, many times you see things, but you don't know you're seeing it. In order to see, you have to be conscious. If I'm sitting there reading a book and I'm fascinated, and my wife says, your dinner's ready, your dinner's ready, your dinner's ready,
Yeah.
and I don't hear it. It's not like my ears are not listening. It's my brain is not allowing it to listen. So I
Right.
need that brain. So I need consciousness. If I'm unconscious, if I'm in a deep sleep, REM sleep, if I'm dead, I don't hear, I don't see. None of my senses work. So what do I need for that? Typical answer would be you need your brain. No. The point is that you need consciousness. And I could play this game with you till you come to your own conclusion that you need consciousness. But to make it short, I'm just telling you that you need consciousness. You can do this without a brain.
Right.
And to prove this, there are in the book Demystifying Reincarnation by Chaitanya Charan, he will give you examples of children that are born without a brain. It's fascinating. I didn't know this existed, but we have in our brain is in a whole pool of water. That water liquid is called cerebrospinal fluid, CSF for short. Most of us have a brain and it's surrounded by this CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. But certain kids, certain adults also have the brain shrinks and there's more CSF. These kids are known to have, so we know of kids that have hydrocephaly. Hydrocephaly means a lot of cerebrospinal fluid, but there's a brain that keeps getting shrunk because of the pressure from the cerebrospinal fluid. There are kids that are born with having cerebrospinal fluid instead of a brain. So they have maybe 5% brain and cerebrospinal fluid. They, surprisingly, have as good a memory as if they had a full brain. They have as good an intellectual quotient, IQ, as somebody who had a full brain. And they have graduated from school and college and gone on to good things. And there's books written about this. So then the question becomes, where does this brain come from? We just said that we thought that consciousness comes from brain. Nowadays, you can do, for various conditions, you need to take out a part of the brain. There are certain surgeries that are known as hemispherectomy, where you cut half the brain and remove it. And you say, oh, wow, poor guy, he's not going to be able to function the same way. His memory is affected, his consciousness is affected. No. With much of the brain removed, this person can still function same way, memory, everything intact. So then the question is, well, if the consciousness is not in the brain, if only 5% of the brain is left, and most of it is cerebrospinal fluid, then where is this consciousness residing? Gita says that, and we just did this in the last chapter, the Gita shloka was that the Atman is like the sun, where the sun's radiance is all over. Similarly, the Atman's consciousness spreads all over the body. So what that means is, suppose I'm sitting in this room and I have sunlight pouring through the windows. The sunlight infers to me that there's a sun out there. When I know that there's sunlight here, there's sun out there, I know that, right? If I have fever, I know that I have some infection. I have a pneumonia, I have an infection, that's why I have fever. This fever is the symptom of the underlying pneumonia. The sunlight is the symptom of the sun. The Gita says consciousness is the symptom of the Atman. That Atman carries the consciousness. Now, bear with me. This is where we're going with this reincarnation. The Atman carries the consciousness the same as the sun carries the sunlight. Without the sun, there's no sunlight. Without Atman, there's no consciousness, not the brain. When the Atman is in the body, the Atman carries its consciousness with it. When you know. Now, how the Upanishads say the size of the Atman. Where is the Atman? You'd say, oh, it's in the brain. No, it isn't. The Atman is in every cell of your body. How big is the Atman? Big whale, you would think big Atman. Small little microscopic ant, small Atman. No. Upanishads say that if you take the tip of your hair, of which I have none, but if you take the tip of your hair and you take it and you break it into 100 pieces, the Upanishad says, and you take one of those 100 pieces and you split that into 100 pieces, so that you've 1/10,000th, I think, of that tip of the hair. That's how big your Atman is inside your body. And the same Atman exists in 8.4 million species of life that exist on this earth. That's what the Upanishads say, 8.4 million species, starting with aquatic to water fowl and reptiles and fish, to other mammals, birds, and then ultimately humans.
Mhm.
So the Upanishads say that this is consciousness within the aquatic plants that has no qualities. It's just consciousness, raw, pure consciousness at its earliest infantile stage. That consciousness, that Purusha, wants to be able to perceive, wants to be able to feel, wants to be able to grow further. So that consciousness then evolves to higher and higher species. Once you get to the level of an animal, let's say a dog, right? Dog is different from a lion. Both are mammals, but a dog, if you start if he goes outside and somebody kicks him, he's going to turn around and bite that person that kicked him. But he comes inside and his master is not a good master, and he comes home in a foul temper. The master kicks him, he will not bite the master. The master is being cruel to the dog's puppies. He will growl, he will bark, but he will not bite the master. Why? Because the dog knows, consciously knows, that this is my master, I will not bite. This is a bad guy on the outside, I will bite. He makes that differentiation. But he's still not a human being. He is still not to the level of a human being. That consciousness, when it transfers from an animal to a human being, you're able to make a lot more decisions that because of the ability that your consciousness has gotten in that small 1/10,000th part of the tip of your hair. That has the consciousness that is within the human being that allows you to make all kinds of decisions. That consciousness has a mind, that has an intellect, it has memory, it has an ego. All of that falls within that Atman. You with me so far?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So we said that the eyes look at things, but without the consciousness being there to recognize it, you can't read. My wife is shouting, dinner's ready, dinner's ready. I'm so wrapped up. My consciousness doesn't perceive it. Without my consciousness, my ears can hear all they want, but my consciousness does not perceive it.
Right.
When I'm dead, the eyesight goes first, ears, hearing comes later. Yet, when you have near-death experiences, you don't see those people saying, I heard this and I heard that.
Right.
They say, I saw this and I saw that. Why is that? Because the Atman reserves within itself, even though it's microscopic, it has the subtle bodies, the causal bodies, the intellect, the mind, the memories. Remember we said that everything is carved into, from all your experiences are carved, and they're called vrittis inside that subtle body. That carries itself with the Atman when it leaves. We talked about this when we talked about Purusha and Prakriti, and maybe you don't remember, but it goes to the next body. When it leaves the body, okay, Upanishads and Gita also say that depending on whether you've done good deeds or bad deeds, when you leave the body, you leave out of one of 9 gates in the body. 7 of them are above and 2 of them are below. The 2 below are the anal opening and the genital opening. The 7 above are the aperture that closes soon after birth, that is at the very top of your head, your mouth, your nose, your ears. The Atman, depending on if you've done good things, leaves from the upper apertures or the lower apertures. If you're going for the upper apertures, your karmic deeds are good. That's a whole other story in and of itself.
Right.
After the Atman leaves the body, it's so traumatized because it says, I don't want to die, that although it looks to run out of a hospital or a traumatic place where something happened, it then comes back looking for the body. It says, I want to stay within the body. And for maybe 3-4 days, it stays hanging around the body, waiting to get back because it's traumatized. It doesn't want to leave. It's painful. It says, I want to be close to my loved ones and all the food that I loved and the taste that I had and all of the pleasurable worldly experiences.
Sure.
So many mystics actually hang around cemeteries. I never knew this before. I was wondering why these people dressed in holy clothes would hang around the cemeteries at night. And what they are doing there is they're trying to get the strength of the atmans that are floating about above them from these dead bodies. It's a whole other story in and of itself. But the idea of cremation actually destroys the body. When that happens, there's no way that the atman can go back, and then the atman is sort of forced to go on to the next body in the next life. So depending on the desires, then the atman says, okay, I have a choice. I mean, if you're a saint like Edgar Cayce, in the first episode, we talked about this monk who had done nothing but good in his life. And Edgar Cayce said, look, you led a very pious life. So you had the choice of coming to this life with a very healthy body. You have no sicknesses, no illnesses. You're extremely wealthy. You're a newspaper man, and you continue to do good things. And your next life will be even better still. So when you've done good karma, your ability to choose your next life, your next body is vast. So you pick that. If you've done bad, your ability to choose is reduced, and you come with sicknesses, illnesses, bad body. So everything that we're doing is a result of our past actions, and we choose a body based on that. There's a lot more that I can tell you about this, but how far have we gone, Lou?
We're 21 minutes in, but if I can ask you a question here.
Sure.
In some of the stories that we've discussed in the earlier episodes, part 1 and part 2, we have the Pollock twins and we have Shanti Devi. Is that pronounced right?
Yes.
So are we assuming that they chose to come back so closely to their past lives? They had earned enough karma, or their life had allowed them the ability to come back so close to their past lives?
Great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So usually when children die, like Joanne and Jacqueline died in the Pollock twins story in England, they were children. They hadn't done anything bad. So they had a choice. They could pick, many different bodies and families, and they had the choice. They chose to come back to the same mother, to the same family, same household, in the same womb at the same time, because the sisters were close. The doctor said, no, there's only one. Now, that's an interesting also phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Because the Upanishads say that the actual process of developing and growing takes place after and not in the beginning. So the doctor said, I only hear one heartbeat. I only see one child. And he was embarrassed later on because the father kept saying, no, there's going to be twins.
Right.
The doctor was embarrassed. It's a true story. You can look it up. The doctor was embarrassed to say, no, you're right. It did turn out to be twins. How did I miss that? Maybe he didn't miss it. Maybe the twins both forced their way into that womb. But because of good karma, they can decide where they're going to be born. And they can say, listen, I know I have the ability to go into a much better womb or much better family or wealthier family, whatever, but I was happy here. I want to come back here. So the desires to come back to a certain position. Now, in Shanti Devi's case, she was born in a Brahmin family, which is considered by her at that time a higher level than the level from culturally, socio-economically, etc., than where she was born. Then why did she choose Delhi, number one? And why did she choose the family to which she was born, which was obviously of a lower status in her mind than where she was initially? But that was 1 year and 10 months after she died. After Lugdibai died, she was reborn as Shantibai. Why did she pick? Because that was the choice given to her. Maybe there were other women who were giving birth at the time too. Of the women that were giving birth, this was her best choice, closest to where she could get back to her original family. She was born in Delhi, and from the minute she could speak, she said, I want to go back to Mathura. So this was just what does it say? When you miss your train stop, right? You're in the train, say, my God, I missed that train stop. I want to get off at the next stop. well, it's nowhere near, but it's the nearest one to where you have to get back to. So I don't care where it is, I'm getting off so I can get back there. Does that explain answer your question?
Yeah, that's exactly how I pictured it. It's fascinating. That explains some of the variances in remoteness from your past life. For example, the Pollock twins and Shanti Devi were very close to their past lives. Some other reincarnations, all of our reincarnations, many of us aren't in touch with them.
Yes.
Because our choices weren't as related to our past lives as theirs.
Yes. Yeah. Many people, their desire is to go further and to forget about their past lives. Or if you're, let's say, miserable with your past life, you say, I'm so glad I died over there and got born over here.
Yeah.
But these people are very attached to, I know from a lot of mothers who I've seen as patients, they live for their kids, for their families. They say nothing else matters. Doesn't matter if I lose all the money I have, doesn't matter all the fame, reputation. I just care about my kids, and that's what I live for. So they want to get back there. Well, last thing, how much time do we have, Lou?
You've got time. Go ahead.
So we talked about these people who escaped from the body and looked and then came back. So it's interesting to note that all of these people heard things. Saw things, not heard things. Even though hearing goes last, you know that when somebody is dying, their eyes are closed or they can't see, and you know that the doctor is saying, she's going to die any minute.
Right.
When you're talking to that person, if you say, Mom, squeeze my fingers, she will squeeze your fingers, meaning she can hear you. She can't speak, she can't see, all our senses are closing down, but her hearing is still intact. Right? You know this, Lou?
I didn't realize that, generally speaking, that was one of the last senses that remain. But
yes, that's the last sense that remains. And so after death, you would think that they hear things. And I don't know how to explain it, but they don't. They see things, their vision. Now, the Atman carries with it this subtle sense in its mind and intellect of all the other senses that it also donates to the gross body. The gross body has the sight, smell, all of that. The example is, if I'm sitting reading something, right, in a library or somewhere on a bench, and I feel as I'm reading with my gross eyes from my gross body, I'm reading, and there's a subtle part of me that says, somebody's looking at me from behind. I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
And you say, what's going on? You close the book, you turn around, and you see somebody staring at you and says, I thought that was you. I recognized you from the back. I didn't want to come up to you. And I say, I knew you were looking at me. I turned around. That part is the subtle sight that you have. You have vision that you can see things when your gross eyes can't. And that is blocked as long as you have, like the blind girls that we talked about before.
Right.
They have their physical, their gross eyesight is gone, but their subtle eyesight is there. So their subtle eyesight comes only when when the body's dead, and then the subtle eyesight can see as if it were real eyesight. So that all of these senses go with you to the next body. They last for a very short period of time in the next body, because then again, the gross eyesight, the gross smell, all of that comes, and each one of the old ones, including the memories, go away. It is born with the memories, but only when it is something as strong as an attachment as Shanti Devi or the two twin Pollock girls, that it remains. Otherwise, memory, the vrittis, although they're carried with you, they all go away when your new body. Most children, even this James Leninger, as they get older, they forget their memories because it's pushed back because of the gross stuff that comes out that blocks it. And only when you die, it comes back again. And the Atman that comes carries with it the vrittis from thousands of previous births. The visions, the memories, the smells, the taste, the experiences, all carried in a gross, like a SIM card from previous cell phones. You keep putting it into new bodies, the SIM card just carries all these telephone numbers and messages and everything from previous experiences. That's how the Atman is. It just carries everything.
I love that analogy, by the way. I've always loved that analogy. The SIM card going from phone to phone.
Yeah, the Atman going with all its vrittis. I like the image of vrittis carved inside, millions and millions of vrittis, as if it's a hard drive.
All
So
right.
thank you,
People,
friends. And
well, let's tell people where they can get in touch with us too.
go ahead. Go ahead.
You can email us if you're not on Facebook. You can comment on Facebook and direct message us on Facebook. But this is even a more expedient way to get in touch with the doctor if you're listening to the podcasts on one of the audio outlets. Gita, Memoirs of a Psychiatrist at gmail.com. Gita, Memoirs of a Psychiatrist, all one word, at gmail.com. If you're on the audio side, check out our Facebook page, Gita, Memoirs of a Psychiatrist. If you're on the Facebook page, check out our audio podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, several other outlets.
Thank you so much, friends. And I hope that you enjoyed these 3 episodes. And I'll talk to you next time.